Hi, what's happening, y'all? We're Rico from StreetScores, and we have three major topics to break down. First of all, Micah Parsons wants to go to the Washington Commanders. We're going to dive into everything he said about Dan Quinn, Jaden Daniels, and the Commanders since as of just going back all the way to January and what he said most recently as to why we're even talking about this. Also, other NFL teams will reportedly try to steal a few of our Commanders coaches this offseason. We're going to talk about that. And of course, also have a final injury update for this upcoming Cowboys game. Who's out, questionable, who's good to go, team captains, all of that type of stuff. But before we dive into all of that, make sure you stiff arm that like button, stiff arm the subscription button, and stiff arm the bell next to that subscription button so you get a notification each and every time I release an informative and opinionated video just like this one. Of course, make sure you pull up. I already have it scheduled, so you can go ahead and click on it and set a reminder. But I will be live streaming this upcoming Cowboys game. I'm ready to beat them by at least 30. I'm hoping for like 40-3. That's the type of time I'm on. Pay them back for what they did to us on Thanksgiving, what they did to us to end the season last year, but especially Thanksgiving, where they had the turkeys ready to eat before the game even started. So they were more worried about how what they were going to do after they beat us than actually focusing on how they were going to beat us. So of course I will be live streaming that and enjoying every second of the revenge we get on the Cowboys. Make sure you pull up for that on Sunday. Without further ado, let's go and dive into this video, man. Let's get it. Adam. Alright, so I always try to avoid clickbaiting y'all as much as possible. Just as a guess from like all of the major topics that y'all probably saw in this title, I'm assuming y'all probably want me to talk about the Micah Parsons thing first, so we'll talk about that first. Well, John Makota tweeted and reported that Cowboys defensive end Micah Parsons on his relationship with Commanders coach Dan Quinn, and this is the catalyst for this whole video, at least this whole part of the video. He said, quote, "Me and Q still talk to this day. He shoots me a text every week or two, more frequently recently. Maybe he's trying to get in my head a little bit." I actually kind of like the fact that he's pointing that out, and I also like the fact that if that's true, hey, shouts out to Dan Quinn for trying to butter him up so he doesn't go out there and try to annihilate Brandon Coleman and Andrew Wiley, and, you know, consequently after that, end up annihilating Jaden Daniels. So, you know, just take a day off, man. You don't, you know, we rock with you here. We buddies, you know what I'm saying? If there was ever a team that you could take it easy on, how about it be for your old pal Q, as he calls him? Continuing with the quote, "He actually helped me get some tickets to the game Sunday for my family." Wow. That goes to show what type of coach Dan Quinn is and what type of player coach he is, regardless of where you're at, whether you're playing for him and things like that. He's always about his guys. That's my guy. It's going to be fun playing against him. And then he also said, "I know he's going to have them riled up. He's probably going to say it's Shark Week, it's fight night. We got to go round 12. We got to knock them out. Rivalry game. I know his little spill," unquote. So you can just see the chemistry there. You can see how much Micah Parsons truly just misses Dan Quinn. Is there a chance that he may want to pull up to the Commanders whenever he's finally free as a free agent? Because this is not the first time Micah Parsons has talked glowingly about Dan Quinn in high regards since Dan Quinn left the Cowboys to go become our head coach. He's also talked about Jaden Daniels a lot as well. I mean, just a few weeks ago, we're going to go reverse chronological order here. Just a few weeks ago, Micah Parsons and Trevon Diggs talked about how they miss Dan Quinn's culture. And they talked about how they see that culture and what the Commanders are doing right now, top to bottom with their organization. They were reacting to the Hail Mary touchdown from Jaden Daniels versus the Bears. And they like went on a whole spiel. You know, Micah Parsons has a podcast. Trevon Diggs, a fellow Cowboys player, their starting corner, when healthy at least, he goes on his podcast very often. And they were both just so, first of all, they were reacting to the Hail Mary and how amazing it was, but they felt like they gave a lot of the credit to the Hail Mary to the culture that Dan Quinn set. So they're big fans of the culture. They even talked about how they miss being a part of a culture like that. And then just like a couple of days after that, they were discussing their top quarterbacks in the NFL. So they showed a lot of love to Dan Quinn, and then they also showed a lot of love to Jaden Daniels, because the exact quotes went like this. Trevon Diggs first talking, or no, this is Micah Parsons actually talking first, my bad. "Among the quarterbacks right now, I would definitely say he's top 10, unquote, when talking about Jaden Daniels." Trevon Diggs responded, "Higher." Parsons responded, "You think he's top 5? Diggs responded, "For sure. Who else you gonna put in there?" And then this led Diggs to name his top 5. He said, I'm going to go him as in Jaden Daniels, Patrick Mahomes, Lamar Jackson, Josh Allen, and Jalen Hurts is playing pretty good right now too. Then Parsons named other quarterbacks who belong high on the list. Jared Goff is a top 5 quarterback right now, he said. And then the two teammates also named Matthew Stafford and Sam Darnold as quarterbacks that are playing really well right now. But I do want to make sure we point out the fact that neither of them mentioned Dak Prescott. This is before Dak Prescott even got hurt. This is before any injury happened to Dak Prescott. They didn't even include him in their top 10, let alone their top 5, which again, Trevon Diggs feels like he's top 5. Micah Parsons easily feels like Jaden Daniels is top 10, but he was kind of pushing back a little bit on the top 5 conversation yet, but probably just because he's so young, he's a rookie, he has to prove more. We have to see what he does, not over throughout just the course of one season, but several seasons as well. That's kind of the stance he was taking, but he still put Jaden Daniels in his top 10. Again, Trevon Diggs has the utmost respect for Jaden Daniels, put him in his top 5. And then even going before that, let's go all the way back to early October. Micah Parsons and Darius Slay were both talking about Jaden Daniels. This was after the Cardinals game. And basically the quote was, "We got another threat in our division, bro. I just can't believe this," unquote. They both look sick to their stomachs. Again, Micah Parsons, and then you have rivals Eagle Corner, Darius Slay. They also appear on each other's podcasts as well. Darius Slay has his own podcast. Micah Parsons has his own as well. And they were just both looking at Jaden Daniels and like watching some of the highlights and just breaking down what happened in that Cardinals game when we beat them by a lot of points. Jaden Daniels had one of his best games of the season. And they look sick to their stomachs. Like, oh my Lord, this is what we got to go up against twice a year for the next how many every years. Like, they just look sick to their stomach. And if you're sick to your stomach about like an opponent that much, that shows a lot of respect. But even before Jaden Daniels took a single snap for the Washington Commanders, before we even officially listed him as the starting quarterback over Marcus Mariota, literally the night that we drafted him, literally the minute that we drafted him, remember CJ Stroud and Micah Parsons had like a watch party for the draft, and Micah Parsons was not too excited about Jaden Daniels being drafted to the Washington Commanders. I mean, he looked stressed. Like, CJ Stroud was like, great pick. Like, that's a great pick, great selection and everything like that. He's a big fan of Jaden Daniels, but that they go way back. They're both from the IE. They grew up together since kids. Like, he and Jaden Daniels have been competing against each other since kids. Like, even remember Jaden Daniels' interview with Keyshawn Johnson, where he was like, I congratulated CJ Stroud, but no matter what, I'm always trying to outdo him. So he won Offensive Rookie of the Year. I'm trying to even outdo that and things like that. So, I mean, they go way, way back. They're like best friends growing up and everything like that. Bryce Young is also kind of included in that, even though Bryce Young is from like Pasadena, but still Southern California circuit. But either way, CJ Stroud loved the pick. He's a big fan of Jaden Daniels. He's been competing against him since they were kids. Micah Parsons, on the other hand, was not happy at all. I mean, that was like the least he smiled the entire live broadcast, and that was only the second pick of the entire broadcast. He was sick to his stomach there. And then again, just to rewind what we just talked about a few minutes ago, weeks later, Jaden Daniels balls out against the Cardinals, sick to his stomach about the fact that they got to prepare to play for him. And then going ahead a few more weeks into the future after that, the whole Bears Hail Mary thing. And they're sick to their stomach, and they're jealous of the whole Dan Quinn culture, and they feel like Dan Quinn is the reason for a lot of that. And then to go even further back than that, how about January 11th? Micah Parsons was asked about Dan Quinn's future because he was still technically a part of the Cowboys. He was not even a head coach for the Commanders at this point. He was still the Cowboys defensive coordinator. This was all the way back on January 11th, mind you. And he was asked about Dan Quinn. He said, quote, "Dan's my guy. And if he does end up leaving me, it will always be love. And hey, he might take me with him. You never know." Unquote, man. Keep that in mind when we're talking about, hey, maybe Micah Parsons wants to pull up to the Commanders. Keep in mind, Micah Parsons loves himself some Dan Quinn, and then also the fact that he's afraid of Jaden Daniels, but also highly respects him and would love to be on the same team as him, may also influence that decision as well. So do not count out Micah Parsons to the Commanders eventually. I wouldn't necessarily say it's going to happen next offseason or whatever, but I wouldn't be surprised if it happens within the next couple of seasons. But also, there was an article or an actual tweet posted by Carlin versus Joe. I believe they're Cowboys reporters or beat writers, whoever, they said the Dallas Cowboys need to trade Micah Parsons. He has no place in this organization anymore. You spent too much at quarterback, wide receiver, and the rest of the team stinks. And basically the argument is we can't pay everybody, so Micah Parsons, if anybody you need to let go, it would be him, not Dak Prescott, not CeeDee Lamb, not Trevon Diggs and those guys. And so Herm Edwards even replied to this. He said there's no doubt on if the Cowboys should consider trading Micah Parsons. So I just gave you the viewpoint as to why, like, the Commanders, it may be realistic for us to get them. And now I'm also providing you why a lot of people, including Herm Edwards and even some Cowboys beat writers, looking at their cap space and their future situation, feel like the Cowboys should trade Micah Parsons away no matter where he ends up going. Just, it doesn't make sense for him to stay in Dallas, they basically feel like. But again, this was before the trade deadline, so that ended up not happening. Who knows what will happen in the future. But either way, Micah Parsons to the Commanders may not be as unrealistic and far-fetched as you may think. I'm not saying it's gonna happen. I'm not saying it's inevitable. I'm not saying watch out for it, be on the lookout, it's on the way. I'm not saying none of that at all. But some people acting like it's impossible. Maybe you're not thinking too deeply enough. But let's go ahead and move on to the next part of this video. So, like I already previewed and mentioned before the intro, there are some Commanders coaches that maybe other teams are trying to steal from us right now. Shouts out to Tom Pelissero, who put out an article, said my annual young coaches list is here. The top candidates for upcoming NFL head coaching hiring cycle and dozens of names to watch for in years to come. And shouts out to Hogs Haven for pointing out all of the Commanders people that were attached. He said a few former players and coaches with ties to Washington, including former safety Chris Horton, and then also current assistant head coach and offensive passing game coordinator Brian Johnson. Remember, he was the offensive coordinator for the Eagles last year. Now he's our assistant head coach and offensive passing game coordinator for us right now. And he may be the type of guy that's going to get a lot of calls during the offseason from other teams. Because remember, the Eagles fired him. It's not like we had to steal him from the Eagles. He was basically a free agent coach when we went and got him. A lot of people he was pretty much thrown under the bus for all of the Eagles' offensive struggles last year. They put all of the blame on him. Even though I feel like he was part of the problem, he was not the problem, and he for sure wasn't all of the problem. But you know how things like that go. So they're going to put all of the blame on one person and act like it was him. And then now he's over here helping Cliff Kingsbury, Anthony Lynn, all of these guys put together one of the best offenses in the NFL, one of the most efficient offenses, especially passing-wise. Other than the last 2 weeks, we were on a historical pace, and Brian Johnson had a lot to deal with that. Definitely had a lot to deal with that. So when you actually go look at the article and see what Tom Pelissero had to say, pointed out the fact that he's 37 years old. He said a prolific college quarterback at Utah and cover model for the NCAA football 10 video game. I forgot about that. Johnson got his start in coaching at his alma mater and began as the youngest FBS offensive coordinator at the age 24. Genius, man. Prodigy type of stuff. He has mentioned the likes of Dak Prescott, Kyle Trask, and Jalen Hurts, whose dad, Averion, coincidentally coached Johnson as well. His first NFL offensive coordinator opportunity last year in Philadelphia went sideways for a variety of reasons. He still interviewed for 2 head coaching jobs, Falcons and Titans, last January before heading to Washington as our passing game coordinator on the offensive side of the ball. And also, shouts out to Dan Quinn because he purposely gave Brian Johnson the assistant head coach role. Even though guys like Anthony Lynn or even Cliff Kingsbury or even Joe Witt Jr. probably deserved that role more. He basically said that it was to give Brian Johnson like some sort of like a program to like see what it's like to be the assistant head coach, to see what Dan Quinn does on a day in, day out basis, every night, every week, every month, what they do on and off the field, things that don't show on the stat sheet, things that matter that you may not necessarily focus on, all of the little tedious work on the day-to-day basis. He wanted to make sure, he gave Brian Johnson like a head coach internship while he was our official paid a passing game offensive coordinator, because he wants to prepare Brian Johnson for his future head coaching role that he definitely wants to get. That was his goal, to become a head coach. He took the Eagles offensive coordinator job in 2023 so he could be a head coach in 2024. Again, things went a little sideways 2023, so he got a couple of head coaching interviews in 2024, but he didn't land a job. So Dan Quinn went out of his way to give him the assistant head coaching title and role just so he can get a lot of the head coaching experience. So when he goes to interview for head coaching jobs in 2025, he'll probably have a better shot at getting it. So shouts out to Dan Quinn for that. Continuing with the article from Tom Pelissero, Commanders head coach Dan Quinn has wrapped his arms around Johnson, who presents in the team meeting every week, helps out in all phases of the offense and game management, and is working in an offense under Cliff Kingsbury that's more in line with Johnson has been accustomed to throughout his football life. This was the perfect situation for him, and I would not be surprised if a team snatches Brian Johnson away from us next year for, if anything, at the very least, to steal him away as an offensive coordinator. So watch out for that, man. Really watch out for that. And then I believe there are other coaches that other teams are probably going to look at, in my personal opinion, but that was like the main one that Tom Pelissero will break down. But he also went and pointed out the fact that some people may try to get Commanders DB coach Tommy Donatel, who's 35 years old. He pointed out the fact that some teams may try to steal him away from us and give him a bigger role, maybe even as a potential defensive coordinator on other teams. So be on the lookout for that. I mean, there's a whole bunch of lists here. He also said Commanders quarterback coach Tavita Pritchard, who's 37 years old, especially with the work that he's done with Jaden Daniels. I mean, I feel like Jaden Daniels is going to be a star regardless, but Tavita Pritchard probably deserves a lot of credit for how quickly and immediately Jaden Daniels rose to stardom and was already in MVP talks. So somebody may steal him away for at least like an offensive coordinator position, some larger role, try to give him somewhat of a promotion compared to what he's doing for the Commanders right now, and try to steal him away from us as well. So be on the lookout. These are some of the names to watch out for that may leave us. But they did not mention Cliff Kingsbury, which I'm really happy about. Like I've already said, man, I feel like we shouldn't have to necessarily worry about Cliff Kingsbury, because I don't think he wants to leave for another head coaching job. And I mean, unless it's like to head coach for college, but if he wants to stay in the NFL, this is as great of a situation as he can get, because I mean, the main reason that Arizona didn't work out is because he was spread too thin everywhere. He just wants to focus on offense only. There was even an Arizona Cardinals reporter that, after we hired Cliff Kingsbury as an offensive coordinator, talked about how when he was the head coach for the Cardinals, like during training camp practices and things like that, he would kind of pretend to go look at the defense because he felt like he was obligated to. But any waking moment that he could spend on the offensive side of the ball in practice and team meetings and things like that, he did. He wanted the title. He wanted the accolades of being a head coach, but he did not want the role and responsibility. He hated that. Absolutely hated it. And then now you see what happens when he only has to focus on offense, and that's it. He doesn't have to worry about not only just managing the entire team as far as like personalities go and game plan. You have to worry about offense and defense, but also as far as building the team. How about like draft and like team visits and everything like that, scouting and all of that type of stuff, or especially on the defensive side of the ball. That's not even his expertise. But like team management, as far as like free agency, having to call agents and things like that, getting in contact with players and trying to sign them and talking contracts and things like that. Like, there's so many nuanced parts of being a head coach that Cliff Kingsbury doesn't even have to worry about right now. He seems like he's the happiest he's ever been in his life. Now, I mean, first of all, not having to deal with all of that previous stuff he had to deal with as a head coach, but now he's in a great situation where it looks like we're building a future Super Bowl contender. He has one of the best young quarterbacks in the NFL right now in Jaden Daniels. I mean, what better situation could you get other than being a head coach maybe for a college team? But he's not even the type of guy that likes to recruit that much, so I don't even necessarily see him doing that. So I honestly think Cliff Kingsbury will stick around long term. I know he looks great right now. I know he's going to get a lot of calls from teams, but I don't think it's realistic to assume that Cliff Kingsbury will leave anytime soon, especially. I don't think he's going. I think he'll be our offensive coordinator in 2025 at least, but I'm thinking even further than that. Now moving on to the next part of the video. Shouts out to my boy Chuck G, because he brought up a good tweet, man. He said Washington got to bring in Daniel Jones at least for an investigation, because like, what do you see when you play us? And I think, hey, I ain't gonna lie, how Daniel Jones always abuses us when he plays us. He always has his best games against us. We're the only reason that he probably even lasted this long before he got cut. And so I completely agree, man. Hey, bring Daniel Jones in as a defensive consultant. Like, what are we doing wrong on defense? What are you seeing that other quarterbacks don't even see? Like, we handled Kyler Murray even better than we did Daniel Jones. We handled Caleb Williams even better than we handled Daniel Jones. We handled a lot of quarterbacks that you would honestly feel are better quarterbacks than Daniel Jones than we handled Daniel Jones. So we got to bring Daniel Jones in to be like, yo, what is it? Whether it's Rivera and Jack Del Rio, Dan Quinn and Joe Wood Jr., what is it? Why can we not stop you? Like, what, please? So I completely agree, man. Hey, hire Daniel Jones not as a player, but as a defensive consultant, a defensive assistant or something. Bring him in for team meetings. Like, these are your weaknesses. This is how I exploit them, and this is what you can do to counter that. For a quarterback like me that for some reason just goes Super Saiyan when I only play against y'all. But hey, shouts out to the Commanders because we did our job, man. It was annoying losing to Daniel Jones for so long. But hey, man, us keep allowing Daniel Jones to have those couple of good games a year kept somehow convincing the Giants by just a hair that maybe we should let them stay around a little bit longer. And now instead of them drafting Jaden Daniels or even being bad enough to draft a Caleb Williams or a Drake May or especially like a Bo Nix who went later in the draft, they were like, you know what? Give Daniel Jones another try. Did you see the way he played against the Commanders last year? Hey, so salute to the Commanders last year. Hey, Rivera, that's one of your biggest gifts. Getting us in draft position to draft Jaden Daniels and also losing to the Giants and allowing Daniel Jones to look so good so that he could stick around as long as he did so that they wouldn't take one of these good young quarterbacks. And now they're hoping to find one in this next draft. So, hey, man, we'll take it. But again, hire him as a defensive assistant, please. Also, moving on. Former Cowboys Tyler Biadasz, Dante Fowler, and Noah Benogany will be the 3 Commanders captains for the game this weekend against the Cowboys, of course. And with them being 3 ex-Cowboys, it makes a lot of sense. We are not going off of who had the best game last week because that was Jeremy Chin, that was Mike Sanderstill, and then offensively, maybe you could throw like Austin Eckler in there or something like that. Those would be your 3 captains if we were going purely off of performance. But Zach Ertz was the captain even after he was no yak Zach against the Steelers, going against the Eagles, and I appreciate Dan Quinn for doing that, for him to do that against their former team and things like that. Let Zach Ertz be a captain against his former Eagles, and he's doing that right now for the Cowboys. But the first thing I thought was no Dorrance Armstrong, though, because he's being paid the most money out of all of those 3 names, I believe, and he's supposed to be a starter. But when you think about it, again, just take a step back. Dorrance Armstrong probably has missed the most games out of that group of 4. If you include the three guys that will be captains again, Tyler Biadasz, Dante Fowler, and Noah Benogany, and then you throw Dorrance Armstrong in there. I believe Dorrance Armstrong has played the least amount of games because he has been banged up a little bit. Noah Benogany has played every game. Dante Fowler has played, if not I think he has played in every game. It was just early on in the season he didn't have as large of a role, and as he started to blow up and get sacks, they started to give him a larger role and allow him to play more. And then Tyler Biadasz is a starting center, and I don't believe he's missed a single game. So Dorrance Armstrong probably is only not one of the 3 tackles just because he's missed more times than the other guys. So it does kind of make sense when you take a step back and think about it. Now let's move on to the final injury update leading up to this Cowboys slaughter we're about to take place. So just to go ahead and get this out the way, but you should have assumed this, cornerback Marshawn Lattimore, dealing with a hamstring injury still, will be out. But it's being reported that his side work is increasing, so there is a lot of progress here. I just talked about yesterday how John Com said that Marshawn Lattimore is already going at like 3/4 speed, like 75% speed in practices right now, so he's almost there. Also, his progress in the system as far as like team meetings and learning like that side of the football, like mentally and like understanding what Joe Wood Jr. wants from him strategically and schematically, that's also progressing as well. So by the time he does touch the field, he's not going to look like a guy we just traded for and is making his first debut. He's going to look mentally ahead of that, even though physically we've been waiting for him to catch up. Dan Quinn also said that he's hopeful about Marshawn Lattimore's availability next week against the Titans. So they're saying that right now, Marshawn Lattimore actually may be good to go against the Titans health-wise. There will surely be some debate over whether to rest the hamstring regardless, since the Week 14 bye week comes up next. Of course, some progress has been made this week, but he has still yet to officially practice. But Dan Quinn feels like after this Cowboys game, he should be able to practice enough to be able to play against the Titans. But I would definitely argue, hey man, we don't need him to beat the Titans, dog. It's not even worth it. Go ahead and rest him past the Titans through the bye week, and then he'll make his debut against his former team, the Saints. It actually seems kind of perfect. So I think that's how we should go about that. Shouts out to Jay Daniels MVP because I agree. He says something is telling me that Marshawn Lattimore will make his Commanders debut after the bye week against his former team, the Saints. Sounds like Dan Quinn is optimistic that he's very close to playing, but I'm not entirely sure if they will play him next week versus the Titans. It's just not worth it to me. I really don't see it being worth it. Remember, we were 7-2 before we lost by 1 point to the Steelers, and we were up 10-6 against the Eagles in the fourth quarter. We were 7-2 without Marshawn Lattimore at that point. And I'm firmly believe that we would have beat the Steelers with a Marshawn Lattimore, even with him being banged up. Because Benjamin St. Juste doesn't allow that game-winning touchdown. We beat them, right? Like, we don't even have the no yak Zach situation with the fourth down and all of that type of stuff. So I just feel like that would have been enough. Marshawn Lattimore is great, but we don't need him, is my point. We were 7-2, and even then, worst case scenario, right now we're 7-4. I'm assuming we're gonna beat the Cowboys. We'll be 8-4. I think we should be able to beat the Titans as well. 9-4 going into that bye week without a Marshawn Lattimore. Don't rush it. He's here for the playoff push, not for November. Also, not only is Marshawn Lattimore out, but hey, Devontae Jean-Baptiste is questionable, and so he just opened up his practice window. Just this week from being on IR. Remember, he got hurt against the Ravens. We haven't seen him since. Maybe within just less than a week of them opening his practice window, maybe he'll already be upgraded from the injured reserve to the active roster and maybe even play against the Cowboys. We'll see. That's a 7th round rookie right there. That is, I mean, he was looking really good and literally game by game was getting better and better. He had a sack against the Bengals, and you could argue that even his games after that, he was getting better and better up to the point that he got hurt against the Ravens. He was starting to be a really impactful player. It's crazy the scouting and the development that we're doing on this team from the front office and the coaching staff to take a 7th round rookie like that. For him to be that impactful, it really sucks that he got hurt, but now we're getting him back. I'm really excited about that. Also, bad news for the Commanders. CeeDee Lamb looks like he's good to go after missing a couple of practices this week. We're going to take a look at the injury report soon. Also, Dan Quinn said the kicker Austin Seibert is trending in a really good way for Sunday. Seibert said all the way back on Thursday already, I reported this to y'all, that he thinks that he will kick versus the Cowboys. So he's optimistic. Dan Quinn said he's optimistic. Let's take a look at the injury report for both teams right now. If you're looking on the screen right now, of course, Marshawn Lattimore is out, but he's our only out. You have Nick Bellore, our Pro Bowl special teamer who's missed the past few weeks, questionable. We'll see if he plays. Devontae Jean-Baptiste already talked about, questionable. Same thing with Austin Seibert. Everybody else good to go. Cleveland Farrell, Dorrance Armstrong, Brandon Coleman, Dante Fowler, Noah Benogany, Jordan McGee, Ben Sinnott, all full good to go. Well, Cleveland Farrell was limited on Friday, but he's typically limited in practices. He ends up playing on Sundays anyway. He's good to go. Cowboys wise though, they will be without safety Marquise Bell and tight end Jake Ferguson, and that's a really big loss for them. Remember, he suffered that concussion on that Monday Night Football game against the Texans, and I'd already, like, even seeing that live, I was like, yeah, he's not playing against us next week, and that really hurts the Cowboys. Now, of course, them losing CeeDee Lamb would have been a way bigger loss, but Jake Ferguson may be next in line. I mean, they don't have any particular like running backs that are dangerous. Dak Prescott's out, and even with Dak Prescott, I really wasn't worried about them. So I don't know, man. They're looking ugly, and then even Zach Martin is doubtful. So now they're going to be banged up without arguably their best offensive lineman, even though he's getting up there in age. But I mean, then even Brandon Cooks, Trevon Diggs, Chuma Adoba, and Marshawn Nealon, Tyler Smith, Nick Vigil, all of those guys are questionable. There's no certainty that they will play. Just as certain I am about Nick Bellore and Devontae Jean-Baptiste playing, I'm just the same amount of certain as either of those guys play. So even if they do play, they'll be banged up. And then outside of that, Deron Blaine, Tyler Guyton, Eric Kendrick, CeeDee Lamb, Jordan Lewis, and Hunter, Luke Payne. I never can get that name right. I used to know it, and then I just forgot it, and I just have not relearned it. But either way, all of those guys seem to be good to go. So the Cowboys are definitely more hurt than us. That's long story short. The Cowboys are dealing with way more injuries than we are, so we have no room to complain. Even fully healthy Commanders versus fully healthy Cowboys, I expect us to beat them by double digits. But now especially, I expect us to beat them by 20, 30 points. I mean, imagine Cooper Rush running around from Frankie Louvu and Dante Fowler all day, and as great as Mike Sanford still's gotten in coverage right now. Also, before we go, just to let you know, the Commanders will be wearing burgundy top with gold pants against the Cowboys, just to give you that heads up. Also, Robert Griffin III will be the Commanders' legend of the game on Sunday versus Dallas. As you've noticed throughout the year, when we have home games, we commemorate somebody at halftime. Remember our last home game against the Steelers, we commemorated LeVar Arrington. We've already done Darryl Green. We've done a lot of legends. Next up is Robert Griffin, and I already know he's gonna soak up that moment big time, but I'm happy for him, man. But yeah, man, that's the end of this video. Please get in the comment section, let me know if you feel about everything discussed in this video. Please still follow that like button, still follow the subscription button, still follow the bell next to that subscription button so you get notification each and every time I release an informative and opinionated video just like this one. Please let me know how you feel about everything discussed in this video. If you, first of all, you made it this far in the video, man, salute to you. I really appreciate y'all. Also, shouts out to everybody that's like donating through the super chats as comments and videos. I'm trying to make sure I reply and thank all of y'all for those, man. But I'm also trying my best to read to reply to as many of the other of everybody else's comments as well when I can. I've just been super busy lately. We just finished like putting up the Halloween decorations. Now we're moving on to the Christmas stuff. We do Halloween huge over here. I guess maybe for my channel members exclusively, maybe I'll show y'all what I'm talking about, how big we do Halloween. It's serious. Like I get the PVC pipes, and like me and my mom, we make stuff together. It's big, like, and we go whole yard, everything, like a whole maze haunted house thing you walk through is crazy. Bigger than what you think, for sure. But either way though, I've just been super busy, so I'm gonna try my best. But of course, let me know in the comment section how you feel about Micah Parsons' chances of coming to the Washington Commanders. How do you feel about teams trying to steal away some of our coaches? I mean, on one thing, of course, it's a bad thing because it's like you don't want to lose great coaches, but at the same time, it shows you that you're doing something right. If other teams are looking at your staff and be like, man, I really want that guy. And so I hope that we can find a way to retain these guys as long as possible. And then, of course, also let me know how you feel about all of the injury situations between the Commanders and the Cowboys for this upcoming game that I will be live streaming. And again, do not leave this video without stiff arming that like button. Make sure you leave a like on the way out. I appreciate y'all. I'm going to catch y'all later. I'm out.